Okay, quick overview of last week, lesson 1 recap. You got this chart printed for you. This is over like 3 pages in this little notebook. This is the entire, again, these are all the headings, like if you just took an English Standard Version of the Bible and you pull out the headings of each one of the sections, that's what each one of these little lines are. And then there's all the different arrows, and you have the key kind of printed there for you as to what each one of these little arrows means and why. We'll touch on these kind of as we get there. We'll see the themes as we kind of run through this entire book, but I wanted to highlight this again as this is kind of, in my mind, this is how I organize the book. Is kind of like this linear thing that goes from start to the end, okay? So I have to have kind of a roadmap, so to speak, of it happened here, then this one happened here, but that happened, and then this, and then whatever else. So I hope that's helpful to you. If not, whatever it was to me. Don't care. We talked a little bit about grammar rules or different types of literature. Remember this fancy word chiasm? I hope everybody remembers that word. We're going to talk about that again this morning and probably a lot throughout this quarter because it's very important to the book of John. It's actually really important to the entire Bible, but again, we talked about this prologue specifically. This is the first 19 verses, and if you break these down into ideas, right? The ideas mirror each other, kind of, and you build towards a middle idea, which is kind of the main purpose. The main purpose here is that all who did receive him and believed in his name, he gave the right to become the children of God, who were born not of blood, nor the will of the flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. Okay? Which fits very perfectly into what John states as his purpose, that is on the first page in this notebook, right? That all these things are written that you might believe. Okay, so everything John is doing here, this is not a passive piece of literature. I think we need to take that kind of off the table. This is written to persuade you, right? This is a persuasive piece of literature that was written to help you believe who Jesus is, okay? Questions or comments before we move on from last week? Nobody thought about that at all from last week? Like nothing? It's a sideways mountain. Yes, please. Yes, yes. There you go. See? We learned something. Okay, so we're going to be the book of signs, right? We talked about this is over half of this book. It's the first roughly 12 chapters, 13 chapters, kind of depending on how you break it up. We're going to be squarely in the book of signs for a long time. We're going to spend most of the quarter in the book of signs, honestly, just because that's where I have spent the most time studying, rather than kind of what's typically referred to as the book of glory, where Jesus talks a whole lot, because I find that very difficult to understand, personally. But still, we're gonna get through it together. So this week, specifically, we're going to talk about the end of chapter 1, where John the Baptist calls the disciples, John the Baptist says who Christ is, and Christ calls his disciples. Water into wine is where we're going to spend the majority of our time. And then the cleansing of the temple, we're going to kind of hit at the very end, hopefully. John the Baptist. So this is how I tend to think about things. I am an engineer. I am a very linear type person. I am a this thing, then this thing, then this thing, and I try and then connect those ideas together. So when you ask me to write notes, I'm probably going to write a table of some kind, or I'm going to write bullet points, because that's just how my brain works. I don't write an abstract thought necessarily. I'm going to try and bulletize things. So this is how I write notes. Again, inside of this notebook that I handed out, there is a lot of blank space for you to write your notes, not for my notes. If you want to use my notes, that's totally fine. You can do whatever you want to do, but I left you the space to try and do whatever helps you. That's the entire point of these things. Not to give you some secret knowledge that I have, because I have none, okay? John the Baptist, the last of chapter 1, the end part of chapter 1. Very interesting that they ask, who are you? And he confesses here what? What does he confess at the end of chapter 1? When the Jews that are sent from the Pharisees, they come to question John and they say, who are you? What does he say? I am not the Christ. What I find kind of interesting here, and I have yet to really be able to put a real good pin in it, is that they were expecting the Christ to come and offer some type of new cleansing, right? So John is out baptizing people in the wilderness, and this is not a foreign concept. They're not like, why are you doing this? What would you do? Why would you ever do this? This is new to us. Like, no, that's not the question. The question of, who are you? So this idea of baptism, this idea of renewing the nation or cleansing the nation is something that they are very familiar with, right, in terms of what their expectation is. But they don't, I can't quite yet put a good pin in as why they are asking him, is he the Christ? If anybody has any thoughts or comments here, that would be very helpful to me personally. Yes? So that's kind of where the rub comes in for me, is that there's no teaching of saying Jews should be baptized in terms of for salvation. There's a terms of cleansing, right? Like there's a whole bunch of laws around washing and ritual cleansing, but I can't find anything that really points, at least in the Torah, that points to an immersion type baptism in terms of a ritual like sin washing. And so that's where I'm saying, like, for me, the pin here is I can't quite pin it down. Any other thoughts here? I'm sorry, I can't answer your question. Yes. Matt first. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. It feels new in terms of definitely in terms of what's recorded. But in my kind of research on this topic, there is some precedent for this cleansing, like this baptism type cleansing in the Jewish nation at this time. But again, I can't find any, without going like and reading a bunch of first century Jewish literature, I can't learn that right now. Yes, what else you got? You had something? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Later it talks about coming through the Red Sea as their baptism into Moses or into the old law, right? Okay, the second point I have here is that there's no, again, like we talked about, there's no direct record of Jesus' baptism. And it's just kind of implied here that John has already done it. Just already done it. And he comments how he saw the Spirit descend on him and it stayed on this man, and that's how he knew. So there's no direct record of John baptizing Jesus here like we get in the other Gospels. But again, it's just implied. I find that kind of interesting. The disciples are called here. So it doesn't specifically say the word John. John never calls himself, he called me, or called John, or whatever. He just says either the disciple that Jesus loved, or I think doesn't even call out a name here. It just says called two people. I can't remember exactly what the exact language is here in chapter 1. But you get John and Andrew, then Andrew gets Peter, they go get Philip, and then they go get Nathaniel. So the big thing I want to point out here is that this is a close friends and family affair, right? So what is the relationship between some of these disciples? If I tell you that this is close friends and family, right, what is the relationship between some of these disciples? It's written for you. They're brothers. They know each other from the same town. They like whatever it is, right? So when we talk about evangelism, I feel like, in my opinion, me personally, I tend to think about, well, I'm going to go preach in the streets, or I'm going to invite everyone into church, and then we're going to do evangelism here, or I'm going to have like these intense Bible studies with somebody at like Chick-fil-A or some other coffee place, or like. But this is family. Like, this is their family. They go to their brothers first, or they're very close friends, right? And I find that very interesting. That's their form of evangelism. These are the people that I'm closest to. These are the people that I care about the most. And that's who I'm going to go get first. Yeah. 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 Who do you have the most influence with? The people you're closest to. Right? Who has the most influence on you? The people that you're closest to. So I just find that kind of interesting, as that's the first people that, yes, Jesus does just call these people kind of quote unquote off the streets, which is its own lesson in its own right. But then they go get their family because they think they found something extremely special. Any other thoughts here? Yes. Mm-hmm. You don't want to ruin. Yeah. 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 You don't want to ruin the relationship with the people you're closest to, right? And I think certainly a fear for me, of trying to be evangelistic. So yeah. Yeah, it's also the people you worry about the most, absolutely, because you care about them, because you're close to them. So it's this dichotomy. All right, so we get our first reference to the Son of Man in this section. We're going to skip that for right now. Just know that it's there. You get John's confession. He confesses two different things. In verse 20, he confesses, "I am not the Christ." And then in verse 36, he says, "Behold the Lamb of God." So anytime you start talking about a repetition of themes or the repetition of a confession or repetition of ideas or words or whatever, so something we can kind of dig a little further into, okay? There are 7 different messianic titles in this section alone. So from verse 19 to verse 53, there are 7 different titles given to Jesus. And just like we talked about in class 1, all the different titles that are given throughout this book, why would we ever give this many titles for one man in such a densely packed section of text? Why would you ever give so many titles? Yeah. 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 Right. Right. Yeah, they were certainly looking for something very different than, yeah, the conquering king. Yes. Yeah. 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 What do these titles, again, like we hit on last week, I want to repeat this again. What do these titles mean to us? Like, you have something? Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so like all these different titles can be described one man because the way you relate to this one man is individual to you, right? Like by definition, the way you relate to this man is individual to you. So you might identify more with one title than another because you are physically a shepherd, and you say like, oh, well, he's the good shepherd, the great shepherd, or maybe you're really into the Messiah. You need a savior figure, like that's really important to you for whatever reason, and that's a title that you identify with. The other thing I want to highlight here is that, again, you get the Lamb of God and the Rabbi, which are repeated in different verses. And again, anytime you start to see repetition in the Bible, especially in the book of John, your mind needs to start firing and say, like, okay, number one, this is really important. Because repetition always means this is really important. Number two, I need to look at this repetition maybe a little closer and see if there's something else here, okay? You can't read this. The text is too small. If you're up front, maybe you can. This is verse 19 through 34. If you break this down, there is a chiasm in this section, okay? There's a little section up front between 19 and 22, and then there's another one between 23 and 34. The big thing here is it centers around verse 29, okay? So if you look at verse 29, the next day he saw Jesus coming towards him and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." So again, you read this whole section, in my opinion, there is this idea mirroring as you build toward this single statement of "Behold the Lamb of God," okay? Behold the Lamb of God. Here he is. He's here with us. If you skip on down from you go to 29 through 35, you get this central idea here of the Spirit has descended upon him and stayed on him. Okay, so again, do you need to know any of this stuff to be saved? Absolutely not. In terms of like the literature here and the structure and the repetition, no, you don't need to know any of this stuff. Is it cool and nerdy? Yeah. Am I a nerd? Absolutely. So like, this is fun to me sometimes. Is it fun all the time? No, but this is fun sometimes. If you kind of look at the way that this was written, the way that God has left this for us and say like, there is so much more here than the exact word that's written on the page, right? The word on the page is exactly what it says it is, and I'm not trying to go any further than that, but you can try and glean more wisdom from that if you start to read these ideas on top of each other, okay? All right, wedding at Cana. We're going to spend a lot of time here. What is the story of the wedding at Cana? Somebody give me the 30-second version. This is an easy one, guys. Wedding at Cana, come on. Went to a wedding. Wasn't enough wine. Turned it into wine. Everybody's happy. Everybody agree with that? Okay. You can do it in 4 icons. Come on. Okay, so again, the things I pull out of this story. This is a very short story. This is only 11 verses. But it is immensely important to Jesus' ministry, in my opinion. So there's this society pressure. Okay, so in my research, preparing for both of these classes in terms of last quarter and this quarter, there's a tremendous societal pressure to have the bridegroom, have the wedding party, the people who are getting married, provide for their community, to provide for this wedding. Okay, so in our terms, it exists today. Okay, if I invited all of you all over to my house, and I said, I'm going to provide the best gathering for all of you all you've ever had. I'm going to provide it at my house. And you all come over, and there are 2 loaves of bread, and 1 jar of peanut butter, and a glass of water, and I'm like, all right, guys, let's do it. Let's have a great party. And we're like, what are you talking about? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So this societal pressure, right, is on us today for sure, but per my current understanding, it was like exponentially more on a first century family, right? This was great shame. And in an honor and shame society, right, great shame would come to you. I haven't yet found the exact document, but I've heard, when I've listened to different people talk about this, there's apparently documentation that says there are lawsuits that were filed at this time in history where people didn't provide enough for their guests. So like, as a guest coming to my party, you would sue me because I didn't give you enough food. I didn't provide enough. Okay, so that's the level of things we're talking about here. Okay, this is not, well, I guess we didn't have enough wine. And no, like this is so much bigger pressure on this family. Okay. The second thing we're going to point out here is that this is the best wine. I will not comment on if this wine is alcoholic or not. Everybody has their own opinion, I'm sure, in this room, and we are not going to talk about that because it is not really important to this exact discussion. It can be important to a different discussion, but it is not important to this one, okay? So we are not going to talk about that this morning. The third thing we're going to talk about a lot of is the word woman. Jesus says he calls his mother woman, and that gives us a lot of, like, I don't really, makes you feel funny whenever you read it on the page. It just sounds bad. We're going to talk about the jars in a couple pages, and we're going to talk about this being the first sign, okay? Moving on. Verses 3 through 5. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, They have no wine. And Jesus said to her, Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, Do whatever he tells you. Why does this rub you the wrong way? Let me ask you that as the first question, and I'll try and refine that. Yes. She seems to ignore what he says. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. He's still her son at the end of the day. He's certainly subject to the look. Yeah, I like that. Yes. How did she know he could do a miracle? Good question. Ooh, maybe. Sure. Maybe that has something. Anybody else? Get it read to us out loud. Yeah, that to me is, I read it in 2025 American English, okay? Because that's the only way I know how to read it, okay? And the English that I've grown up with, if I were to say, woman, talking to my mother, like, come on. Like, but, I'm not sure that's the way it should be read. I think that's the biggest point I'm trying to make here. I did not check the message, no. Right. Exactly. It's all in the inflection. It's all about how you say it. It's all about how you say something to somebody. So this word in Greek is truly just the word woman. There's no other real alternates, right? You can say a woman, a wife, a woman, a married woman. But if you think about like a married woman, that could be a term of respect to say Mrs. insert last name. However, let's think about some other ways that this is used. He calls the Samaritan woman by the same term in John chapter 4. So if you think about that, where he meets this woman by the well, he uses this same term to refer to her. In John chapter 8, he refers to the adulterous woman the exact same way. So you get his mother, Samaritan, and an adulterous woman, right? So you get all three pictures here of like, man, this is really spanning the whole gamut here of like these types of people. You're referring to the same term. And he refers to his mother again as woman while he's on the cross. And do you think while he's hanging on the cross, he's being disrespectful to his mother? I have a really hard time saying that. I have a hard time saying Jesus was disrespectful to his mother, period. So in my personal opinion, this is, one, a hard thing to translate because the way we read it, the way we use the word woman. I think this also more than likely indicates a change in Jesus' relationship with his mother. Okay, so at this moment, he's performing his first sign, at least what John records as the first sign or the first miracle that Jesus does. And at this moment, right, Jesus goes from a very private ministry to a very public one. And maybe not in terms of I'm performing to a lot of people at this point because there's a limited audience, but his relationship with his mother changes in this moment, where he is no longer just her son. Sure? Yeah. Yeah. He does. So my hour has not yet come. So again, we get another reference to his or my hour in right here. This is all just building towards this thing. You got to think of John as a story as like a big crescendo, okay? And this is just building on that, building on that. This is probably like the opening note. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. because she knew. Yep. Yeah. And right. So if you've raised someone, even in my limited raising of children, right? I've only been through 13 years of it so far, but there's certainly each child has their own language, right? And so when that kid talks to me, when one of my kids talks to me in a certain way, you may take it in a worse way because that's not something they would ever say, or may take it in look, they talk that way all the time, that's our relationship, that's how we communicate. So I don't think, my point of all this is that we should not read into this as Jesus being insulting towards his mother. That's my big point, is that one, I don't think it's written that way, and two, we don't really know their relationship. We don't know the inflection. We don't know how this was addressed. And so if somebody says that, oh, well, Jesus was disrespecting women, especially his mother, we should be able to refute that and say, that's not, that doesn't make sense. Yes? Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So when it talks about being, the other translation there is a married woman, and just like we would say, Mrs. insert last name, that is a term of respect. Like you would refer to a teacher that way, or you would refer to somebody in a position of power or authority over you in that way. So I think that's probably the way we should read it, not just as the 2025 English woman, insert whatever. All right, we're going to keep moving. The jars. These are 20 to 30 gallons per jar, times 6. So that's 180 to 240 pounds of water, times 6. These jars were filled to the brim, so there's no room to add anything. Why is this important? Why does John record this? Why does he record these details? Yeah, he had that can of the concentrate up his sleeve, and he's just adding the concentrate. Yeah. But there's no room to add anything here. What about the size? Why is the size important? This isn't complicated. Is that, yes? Yeah, the enormity of it, right? You can't fake it, right? This is not, if this is 30 gallons times 6, right, this is an enormous amount of liquid, right? Think of a 5-gallon bucket. And this is 6 of those? That's a lot. The order, this is his first sign. He manifested his glory. Why is it important here? Why would Jesus manifesting his glory be important in reference to wine? And I'm just interested, I don't have a right answer here. I'm just interested to hear your opinion. It is a representation of his blood, absolutely. What else? I mean, it's such not trivial, right? I don't want to belittle it. It's because he did turn all of this water into wine. But in the scheme of the other miracles recorded, this is how he manifested his glory the first time? It seems trivial. He's not, all he's doing is helping this wedding party. He's not healing anybody. This isn't some massive, life-changing thing, but this is how he chooses to reveal himself? Why? Why? Yes? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple things here personally. We'll talk a little bit about, what does this mean a little bit later, but these are what type of jars? What type of jars are these? It says specifically, it calls them out specifically. For purification. They're purification jars. Yeah, so you're taking a purification jar, filling it with water, and then turning it into the best wine. Okay, and so if Jesus is our new covenant, if Jesus is this new relationship that we have with Christ, or with God, he's this new relationship we have with God. You're taking this old act of purification and turning it into something new. So like symbolically, that's kind of cool, right? Like symbolically, I've taken this old thing that was purification that you had to do over and over and over again in the old law, and now I've turned it into the very best celebration. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. I think that's exactly right. And I have a slide on that later of just like, this is at a wedding. And you can't forget that this is his first public miracle, at least that John records for us. This is the first thing. And so it's not trivial that it's at a wedding, right? This is a new covenant. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, more of that in a few minutes. But yes, anything else? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's not. Yeah. It was water, now it's not. Like, that's pretty amazing in its own right. I think there's something else. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. I find that kind of fascinating too, because like we talked about the size of these jars, like the physical quantity of water here, and did the servants know? So like, did the servants play a role in this miracle? Did the servants who filled these jars play a role in this miracle? I mean, yeah, without a doubt. But that's a lot of work to do. Like, how long would it take to move a 240-pound plus the weight of the jar? Right? You're talking body, like human-sized jars here that these people have to go fill. This isn't I'm going to the tub or I'm going to the spigot outside and I'm filling this thing. I've got to go get this water and bring it somewhere. So I think there's something there in terms of why, like who knew and like who was this for? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The power to, yeah. Yeah. In one of the commentaries I read, it does talk about how each one of these miracles you can quantify or qualify in terms of their God's power over the created. So this is in terms of quality, right? Like this is God's power over the quality of things. And then you get like the quantity in the feeding of the 5,000 where God shows his power, Jesus shows his power over the sheer quantity of things. Yeah. 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 That's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. It'll take me a minute to digest that one. Anything else here? Okay. Again, he saved the best to last. Yeah. The best comes last. Yeah. So again, all of these things are written so that you might believe. And I think to Stephen's point, like, who is this for? Well, kind of for us. Guys. Like, the wedding party didn't know Jesus did this. The servants may or may not have known. The disciples, it says specifically, thought about it later. Like, So in this moment, who is this for? And it's us. Like, look around. That's who it's for. Okay? So I think Scott already touched on this. Why at a wedding, right? And this wedding is a new covenant. A wedding is a new establishment, a new thing, right? You're taking two things and making something new. That didn't exist before. This is a covenant. It's an agreement. And this idea of wedding, this idea of God marrying or being wed to his people is not new if you're a Jewish reader, and it should not be new to us as Christian readers, right? As a Jewish metaphor in Jeremiah chapter 31, I don't think we're going to have time to read all this, but if you read Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 31 through 34 here, there's a lot here about, though I was their husband, declares the Lord, for this covenant that I will make out of the house of Israel after those days. So there's a covenant between God and his people, God calling his people his bride. Okay? Isaiah 54. For your Maker is your husband, the Lord of hosts is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. The God of the whole earth he is called. So again, this is just littered throughout the Old Testament in terms of the metaphor of Christ or of God being wed to his people. Okay? What is the most famous verse we go to in the New Testament in terms of Christ being married? Ephesians 5. That's my opinion. I mean, maybe you all have a different one, but Ephesians 5 and verse 32, this mystery is profound. This is in terms of, let's start in verse 31. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. So this mystery of marriage is profound, and it refers to our relationship of Christ and the church. Comments or questions here? Like, you all should hopefully have some thoughts and ideas spinning around in your head that I just cannot articulate. So articulate them for me, please. Hit me with something. Yes? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, there's certainly some commentators who believe that the 6 jars is important, right? Just like there are 6 days in creation, and then you have the 7th, which is like the best, and it's the rest, and this is Jesus fulfilling the rest, right? Like all 6 are fulfilled, they're changed, and now you get to celebrate. We're at this wedding feast, so now I am resting, I am celebrating this new covenant, right? So there's certainly some commentators that believe that. Any other thoughts here? Come on, guys. We got 5 minutes left. Okay. Revelation chapter 19 also refers to kind of this bride of Christ. Let us rejoice and exult and give him the glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and the bride has made herself ready. It was granted her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure. And again, who is that? Who's the bride of Christ? We are. Okay? So this idea of a wedding is not new to the Old Testament. It's not new to the Jewish people, and it's certainly not new to us as New Testament Christians. And Jesus doing this miracle at a wedding, I think, really points to all these metaphors kind of coming to a literal head, and then we get to read it as a metaphorical head. Okay, cleansing of the temple. What happens at the cleansing of the temple? Just shout it. Yeah. During Passover, yeah. Yeah, so he goes to the temple during Passover. They're selling a bunch of stuff they shouldn't be doing. Makes a whip, drives them out. Simple as that, right? Sort of. So this is during Passover. And what is Passover? Somebody tell me what Passover is, what it symbolizes. What is Passover to the Jewish people? Ooh, there's a lot. We got mercy over here. What was that? Deliverance from Egypt, from bondage. Yeah, when the angel passed over, the Jews were not killed. So the Passover is this celebration of freedom from slavery. That's the one sentence I would use. And that sentence, right, could expand exponentially, right, in terms of what is slavery and what is freedom and all these different things. This is at the temple. And what is the temple? What is it? It's a place of God, what'd you say? Where God resides, yeah. This is their interaction point with Yahweh. This is the point where they live with God. God lives with his people here. So now we have the physical embodiment of God coming to the point where God lives. And what does Jesus say about the new temple? Destroy this temple and I will what? Raise it up. And they're so confused because here's this point that's taken 47 years to make, and what are you going to do? How in the world are you going to do this? And again, even it's kind of indicated that even the disciples at this point don't get it, because it says later they thought, but he was referring to the temple of his body. Like that's a little like insert. So at this exact moment, do I think the disciples knew what he was saying? In my opinion, no, because I think that was kind of they can look backwards and say like, oh yeah, you remember when he said that? That was really cool. Why does this follow a wedding feast? It's on the page. Just read it. Christ is the new covenant. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We're given the ability to celebrate who he is. He is God among us, right? He is God among us. Right? If you think back to all these different titles that he's given, some of these are going to indicate different aspects of who Christ is and how we can relate to him, okay? Christ is the new covenant between God and man, and Christ lives among his people, right? He's now going to physically marry his mankind, just like he did at Mount Sinai, but he's going to do the same thing with us in terms of the covenant of his blood. But you have to clean house. You got to clean house, right? And so he comes to the temple and he sees all these things going on, and he's got to get rid of the bad. You have to cut out the bad. Yep. Yep. Yeah, they get a lot on about the Sabbath. Yeah, I know what you meant. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so there's a lot of parallels between this and the Exodus. All right, guys, that's it for us this week. Next week, we're going to try and cover chapter 3 and 4. If anybody didn't get a book and they want one, come see me.